family platform for 1.5 years together with us. Me and Jonas and Lea we were together in the advisory board of family platform. So it's a pleasure. A warm
Thank you, Madeleine, for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to come here. Dear friends, my approach to the question of what children need for their well-being is that of a researcher, as Madeleine already mentioned. I have conducted a longitudinal study, which means that the same individuals have been studied several times, starting from middle childhood. We need longitudinal studies for understanding human development and factors that affect it. This study started when the participants were 8 years old. There were 12 entire school classes from central Finland, altogether 369 children who participated in the study. The latest data were collected when they were 50 years old in 2009, and we met the same individuals several times. I first used peer nominations and teacher ratings for collecting data, but in adulthood and also the parents of 12 and 14-year-old participants were interviewed. So we have used interviews, inventories, medical examinations, and all those measures over the years. So my interest has been in middle childhood, in early adolescence when I started. For a long time I have had the opinion that these life stages are much neglected in psychology, in society. And we can see at present in Finland that parents tend to think that their children are very independent. They know what they want to do, they don't need their parents anymore, and they let the children, when they go to school, to be very much on their own. And we can see problems also resulting from this. This study was my doctoral dissertation when I started in 1968, but the results of my dissertation were so interesting, so I wanted to continue the study and see what happened to these children when they became older. I never thought that I would follow them for 40 years, so it just happened. And I seem to be married to the study. Okay. So when I started the study, I developed a model to describe children's socio-emotional behavior. I had studied children's aggression just because I was a research assistant at the university, and we had a joint project. But I became interested in what other ways there were to solve conflicts. All children were not aggressive children, but we had very few words to describe non-aggressive behavior. They were nice, they were inhibited, or so, but it was not there were no any clear terminology to use and no theory about that. And I built a theory. You see in this picture those 4 words with the number 8, so it means age 8. And I thought that kids may be aggressive in a conflict situation, they may become anxious, socially helpless, they may be compliant, nice, withdrawal, and they may be active, constructive. They may try to find good solutions to conflicts. And I studied this. There was the idea that behaviorally active behavior may be well controlled or poorly controlled, but also negative emotions in passive behavior may be well controlled, as in nice, compliant behavior, or poorly controlled, as in anxious behavior. Peer nominations and teacher ratings confirmed this model, and it was very easy to discuss with school teachers about these kinds of children. They are not types of children, but they show some inclinations of children to behave in a certain way. But then I want to know what happens to these children later, and therefore we collected data at age 14. And we were able to meet almost 100% of them at age 14. And then I really became interested in child development because there was continuation. So those children who were aggressive, difficult children in school classes, they tended to hang around in the streets. They were always going with their peers. They had conflicts with their parents. They started they started drinking or smoking first and drinking early. They had girlfriends or boyfriends very early. Nowadays they also have sexual experiments, but then I didn't ask it. But the same phenomenon can be seen now. And they continued this kind of style of life when they became older. This under control style of life also included antisocial behavior, heavy drinking, and so on. But these anxious children, they tended to become negativistic. They didn't like school. They didn't do well at school. They hadn't hopes or goals for the future. They seemed to finish their school too early, drop out from the school. Their lifestyle developed towards the kind of brittleness. So they were fragile in a sense. They hadn't real good basis for their life. Low self-esteem and so on. I marked over-control because it's an international term, psychological term used for this purpose. Okay, but then those compliant children, they were dependent on their parents. They hadn't many friends. They hadn't many hobbies. They did well at school, but their life was more limited to home settings. And when they became older, they refused from experiments with smoking and drinking and drugs and so on. They had the reserved style of life, and they started dating later than others and so on. And then these constructed children, they who were reasonable in difficult situations, negotiated with others, they tended to develop a kind of responsibility orientation. They took responsibility for their schoolwork, their hobbies, their friendships. They were doing well, and their style of life is called resilient. It continues the same kind of pattern. They finished their studies. They, high school or obligatory school, went to study a professional vocation somewhere, and they also had societal responsibility feelings. So this is a rough description. Of course, these paths aren't valid for everybody, but these are the trends, these developmental trends. And I was very interested in knowing what kind of factors might affect the development. In Finland at least, I don't know whether it's here in Sweden, it is very common to say that everything depends on socioeconomic status. So these differences would be due to differences in socioeconomic status. But the results showed that there was a slight trend that children who were constructive, oriented to responsibility, they came from a better social background, whereas those who were anxious and developed a brittle style of life, they came from a lower socioeconomic status. But this is just significant trend. It's not a strong trend. What we also found was that anxiety and orientation to negativism that was related to many changes in these children's lives. So there were many moves, breaking homes, there were lonely afternoons and changes of caretakers and many problems in the stability of the background. But interestingly, this dimension from aggression to compliant behavior was not explained by socioeconomic status at all. So it was completely independent of that. So children's aggression is not dependent on socioeconomic status. That was the message. But what was important was that that was parenting. So we found that in this direction where there is this high self-control, low self-control, it was very strong relationship with the style of parenting. And that was my start of family studies and also interest in family studies, because when I got these findings, in general, I noticed that when children had high self-control, either this compliant or constructive type, parenting could be described as child-centered parenting, whereas this aggressive and anxious behavior was related to adult-centered parenting. And what is included in them? Child-centered parenting includes that the parents know the child's free time company, they know where the child spends his leisure, parents trust the child, encourage school attendance, there is no spanking, or if there were, at that time it was not forbidden in Finland, there were some spanking, but it was limited only to childhood and it was mild. Parents were sympathetic in child's failure at school. Parents considered child's opinion. There were just restrictions and sanctions, conversations between parents and child daily. Parents approved the child's leisure activities. So it was not living on the condition of the child, but it was a mature adult who maintained the adult role in the family, but listened to the child and understood the child's developmental stage and supported it